chapter 4 and verse 4. Galatians chapter 4 and verse 4. Galatians 4, chapter 4, verse 4. And verse 4, but when the fullness of the time was come, God sent forth his Son, made of a woman, made under the law, to redeem them that were under the law, that we might receive the adoption of sons. You know, there are some people that no matter what they're going to do, they're always late. Always late. I used to pastor one church, and whatever I did, I'd always have one couple that had always come in. They would always come in late. Well, when would they usually be? It'd either be whatever I was reading the scripture or the last song that we had, but it's always late. And so some of them had said, well, what it is, they wanted to make sure they got their act of the offering plate was right. Well, I don't know if that was it, but there are some people that are always late. And the only way some people will ever be on time if they work for a company where the company will dock them if they're not on time. And then if they missed so many times, then they would be fired or something like that. But other than that, anything else that they will have to do, they're always late. Always, I put it this way, the old saying, they're always behind time. Somewhere on the other side, they just can't get in a hurry, they just can't get ahead of time. And so I hired a boy one time, whenever I worked at the service station, told him to be there at 8 o'clock. Well, 20 minutes after 8 every morning, here he'd come dragging in, just like a dead light that's falling off of him. And so, because somehow or another, he just seemed like he just couldn't get up to make it right on out. Well, whenever I was working on the milk route, I had this boy that would start out at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning, and had this one boy that, he would, up till about 10 o'clock in the morning, he would deliver milk just like that. He would, about 10 o'clock he would wake up, and boy, he would just fight fire the rest of the time. He'd ready to get the milk out. Well, I bet then we find that there are some people that somehow or another always late. Always late. Well, I wonder if it comes down to the Lord. Do you know, there's one person that has never been late. The Lord has never been late. Well, we find that we look at everything that he does. It's always exactly the wrong time. He's never had one time that his time clock has ever been off. Now, several years ago, I don't know how they work it now, but several years ago, whenever they used to have the old wind-up watches and had so many jewels in them and so forth, some of the people that were on the railroad that had their watches, those that were foremen, they had to have a watch that if that watch was off 10 seconds of time in 1 week's time, they had to take the watch and have it worked on, because they needed them to be right on schedule in order to know exactly whatever time was going to come due. And so I had an uncle that was one of those that had to keep his watch like that. And so the last job that they had him to do around Bristol, as we watched over whatever they were doing, the overpass up here over the Weaver Pike right next to Calvin there. Why, his job was to watch the contractor. That's all he was to do. And so 15 minutes before the train would come, he was to get up to give him a schedule. He was to get up, go check the tracks to make sure it was safe, and then when the train gets through, he'd tell him to go back to work. And so that was all of his job. But he had to have a watch that was right on time. A watch that is on time. Well, whenever it comes down to the whenever they shoot those spaceships up, they've got to have a certain time that they shoot it, and a certain time they cannot. There's a certain time that they can be able to send that spaceship, one of those spaceships up, a dock to take the supplies up, and it has to be right at a certain time. Well, the Lord's got his time, and it's all there. Just amazing. Look, whatever you think about, concerning the tide coming in and out. How that the Lord has got it that you can go over to the beach and it tell you exactly when high tide is going to be. It will tell you when low tide is going to be. But not only that, you can tell when the moon's going to come up, when the moon's going to go down, and the same way as the sun. The Lord is one. We must say that he's got a big time clock here. He's got a big time clock that he's doing everything with. But also the Lord does some other things on time. Well, we find one man that goes by the name of King Saul was disobedient unto the Lord, because he was to wait until a fellow by the name of Samuel would come, and then Samuel would do the offering unto the Lord. Well, Samuel didn't come exactly whatever Saul decided to do, and so he decided he was going to go ahead. Well, sometimes we try to do instead of the opposite of waiting too long, we try to get ahead of the Lord too. We try to do that. So what happened? He went out and he offered up an offering unto the Lord. But that offering was not satisfied with the Lord. It was not satisfied because God had Samuel to come right at the time that offering was to be offered up on the Lord. Well, now it comes down to something else. We come down to the time, whatever that Jesus would come. Do you know that whatever that Jesus comes, he comes exactly the time, whatever the Lord had planned for him to do. Now, hundreds of years, the people had been looking for a Savior. They had been looking for a king. They had been looking for someone that would set them free from their sin. They had been looking for someone that was going to be a king one day. And so they began to wonder, is it going to happen? Can you imagine, whatever they come to the 400 years in between the Old Testament and the New Testament, that for 400 years the Lord didn't even speak at all. All they had was the Old Testament prophets and that. But finally, after 400 years, the people were beginning to wonder, has the Lord just give up on it? Has the Lord quit? Has he just given up on it? But what happened? After whatever the 100 years of time had passed, suddenly the Lord just spoke to a fellow by the name of John, to prophesy concerning Jesus. Whatever there was going to be one that was going to come. Well, whatever that Jesus was come and was born in the city of Bethlehem, do you know that he was born right on time? He was born right on the time that the Lord had for him to be born in the city of Bethlehem. The Bible says the fullness of time. The Lord had a time that Jesus was to be born, and so because of that, he made sure that he was born right on time. But there's something else about it too. And the fact of all of this, Satan may have tried to interfere too. He may have tried to interfere because here it was, whatever that Jesus was to be born, whenever the time was close by, Jesus and them were between 80 to 100 miles away from the city of Jerusalem. And they didn't have a quick way to get there. They didn't have an airplane. They didn't have any kind of a railway express and so forth to get there. And so, sometimes those, especially sometimes, it'd be dangerous. So I was on one night on a train one night, and the thing was trying to make up for time because it's already about an hour late then. And so I was getting kind of scared myself too because I'm afraid they're going to miss bed checks that night too. But anyway, that thing got so fast it finally started rocking on the tracks. The train did, and you had to slow it down because it was getting almost getting out of control with it. Well, we find that they didn't have all of that to get from one country to the other. And so, they're trying to make trains now that'll go about 200 miles an hour, something like that. And so, I tell you what, that all may be that you're going to get there before you even start. But anyway, we find that all of that, but where was Jesus at? Where was Mary at? She was up in the city of Galilee. She was up in there, and the Lord had a fullness of time, and also he had the place where Jesus was to be born. But how was he going to get them down to the city of Bethlehem? How was he going to get them? Why, he didn't have any other plans except one thing, and that's what most of you here tonight got also. Most of you is either going to have to mail or make a trip over to Bluntford to pay your taxes, right? Most of you are going to have to even do one of the thing over there. Well, that's what happened to Joseph and Mary. The Lord laid up on the mind of a king that didn't know the Lord and had some other god and thought he was the God to tax the people, and they had to go back to their hometown in order what would be their percentage of their people there to be taxed. And so Joseph and Mary had to make the trip all the way from Nazareth down to the city of Bethlehem, outside of the city of Jerusalem. Well, they're right on time. And I don't think that Jesus was 1 minute late either. Right on time that the Lord had planned for Jesus to come to this earth, he came back. He came to the earth right on that time that he had, when the fullness would come. Because God had his Son for a purpose. God had his Son for a purpose. That he make out of us sons of God. Yet he sent his Son for make out of us. That there would be no other way that we could have it. So he sent him to redeem us. Redeem us, set us free from our sin, put us on our way to heaven. God in His own time planned our salvation. God in His own planned salvation. But think about this. What if God had never sent His Son, too? What if God had never sent His Son? First of all, there would be no church for us to assemble together. There would be no use to us even come to the church, because He's the head of the church anyway. And so then there would be no God for us to worship, and we would all be worshiping in vain. And so there would be no place just to point us towards heaven if Jesus had not come. But then next of all, I must say this. If Jesus had not come and the fullness of time, there would be less love for one another than we have now. Less love. Think about the lack of love that there is in our world right now. But you know, a proven study shows this. Church attenders and religious people are the first to offer help in the case of tragedy. The rest of them just don't care most of the time. Did you know that more hospitals, orphanages, schools have been started by Christian religion than any other thing? Think about it this way. Not one school, not one atheist has ever started a hospital. Not one atheist has ever started a rescue mission. And think about this. Some of you might remember a woman by the name of Madeline O'Hare Mary. The head atheist. They don't know what happened to her. And they don't know what happened to her son, her grandson. They don't know what happened to those two. But Bill Mary, her son, got saved and set free from sin. Now, her son, Bill, was the one that she used to start the Bible, getting closed out of the school. Whenever she went to Baltimore and got the prayers and Bible thrown out of the schools in Baltimore over Bill. Bill went back after he got saved and apologized to people of the city of Baltimore about that. But he said to his mother one time, he said, "Mother, let's buy an X-ray machine and put it in the hospital over here," and said that would give us man. Then his mother said, "No, I want to keep the money in order to fight these people called Christians." You see, they don't start it. It's been most our hospitals, most our schools, has been started by Christian people who wanted things to go forward for the glory of the Lord. And you know, some of our top universities now, that some of them are very backslidden now, they were started